So on this last call, it's going to be all about like how I get someone from pain to PRs. Okay. So the first four steps that I take with someone is we want to extinguish the fire, we want to mobilize and strengthen, then we or mobilize and stabilize, and then we want to strengthen, and then we want to get into performance. So for me, when we're trying to like extinguish the fire, right, extinguish the pain, what we want to do is we want to find some feel good stuff. And this is going to come from our assessment, right? And so this helps us know, hey, these XYZ movements or these movement patterns, they feel great. And so if we have pain, if we push a little too hard, we know that we can come back to these, we can fall back, we can get that pain back under control, and then we can start again. Okay. So for me, I don't like to do just the bullshit rehab that, Aunt Betty Sue from, her shoulder replacement or her knee replacement or whatever, at 80 years old. I don't want to do that kind of rehab for lifters. So we like to push. When we push, things get a little cranky from time to time. So we really have to establish that foundation first of extinguishing the fire. That way, if one, we have to break through the pain, right, before we can really start to mobilize and stabilize. But then as we start to get into like the strengthening and the performing, if we do have a little bit of flare up from time to time, which is very common, right? We know we can fall back on these things. So extinguishing the fire is the most important thing. We have to get that breakthrough pain so that we can actually build from there. Again, mobilizing, stabilizing. Sometimes those can actually be what's extinguishing the fire. It just kind of depends on the person. There are feel good exercises that we like to do, but we also, kind of one of the biggest things I preach on and talk about is getting to the root of the issue. So we can't just stop at extinguishing the fire. We have to go past that where we're doing the mobilizing, the stabilizing, the strengthening, and then getting into that performance. To me, like that's the only way to do rehab. If you just stop at extinguishing the fire, you're not ever going to get out of pain because all you're doing is reducing how pissed off those tissues are, but you're not actually doing anything to like prevent those tissues from getting pissed off again, right? That's where steps 2, 3, and 4 really come in. Okay. So that's kind of my 4 steps. Everybody is different. What we do is we really find we try to find these things out when we're doing the movement assessments, when we're looking at video breakdowns of squat, bench, dead, clean and jerk, snatch, whatever the movement is that's causing pain. We want to find that out. Now, sometimes it does take us, a week or two to find things that really help extinguish the fire in the most efficient path. And if that's if that's what it takes, then that's okay, because the most important thing is that we found something that really works. And so, we might do a day of assessments, but really we're in an assessment period for the first like month. We're trying to find things that, hey, like maybe we pushed a little too hard, or hey, this feels really good. I came into the workout today, or I came into whatever with like a 2 or 3 out of 10 pain, but after doing this, it dropped it down. Then we like to see if that happens over time or if it was just a fluke thing. And so, really, our assessment period, I always say it's like a 1 day assessment, but it's really that first month that we're just really trying to figure out, hey, where can we push? How can we push? Where do we need to pull back? What things do we need to find out in order to actually like slingshot us forward? So those are my 4 steps. Again, everybody's different, everybody's unique. Extinguishing the fire is unique to that person. There's similarities, there are commonalities, just like with certain mobility drills or stability drills. But for me, like everything has to be so individualized. And that's where like I get so mad with, these top 3 exercises for low back pain or shoulder pain or whatever, because really like you might have the same type of pain as someone else, but the reason that it's occurring is completely different. And so, yeah, like you can extinguish the fire, you can do all these things, but it's not actually preventing that pain from coming back. So, in my mind, you're not actually rehabbing anything. if that makes sense. Um, so on that, I want to take you through an example of someone who we talked about in the last video, Larry. Okay. So we're going to say Larry had pain with 500 pounds with a deadlift, right? Anything under that, 450, 475, he was fine. So if we know, hey, my pain doesn't start until I get to a certain level or a certain threshold, then what we want to do is we want to play under that threshold. So we're not pissing things off, but we're still getting stronger. Now, do not mistake me. We still want to do all the things to get out of pain. We still want to be able to push that threshold. We still want to actually rehab. But if we have a meet coming up, if we are so scared of losing progress in the gym, then this is something that we can do to make sure that we don't lose ground. Okay. So in this scenario, we're going to say 500 pounds was what caused pain. Okay. Again, 450, 475, no problems, but felt a little light. If we're doing percentage based or we're doing RPE, it's a little light, right? So, what I like to do is one, before all that, I like to look at a video of the movement and see if we can figure out anything. I just did an assessment with someone tonight who he was not dropping his hips at all with his deadlift. His back hurt. This is one of those rare instances where I do think form is probably playing a little bit of a key into his back pain. I don't think it's the whole case, but I do think that it's a part of it and why he is having flare ups right now. Um, so just looking at your video, looking at your lift, I like to, depending on the lift, right, and depending on what's going on, I either like to look at it from the side, like straight on, a 45, or like straight in front. And you're like, okay, well, that's three different views. How do I know which one? It really depends on your lift and what you're trying to see. Usually if I'm not sure what I'm looking for, I just want to see something. I'll either do from the front and the side. If someone can't do two videos, I'll just get a 45. So you kind of have to play around with a video angle, but you have to video and look at your lifts and see what's going on. And if you don't know like what you should be looking for, shoot me the video and I will look at it. Okay. Um, you can look at like points of performance, things like that. Everybody's a little different on like what a point of performance is. But compare it to what you think is the most ideal form. Send it to me. I'm happy to take a look at it. But we have to video first. Okay. So that's just first and foremost. As far as training with pain, going back to the example of the guy who had pain at 500, but 450, 475 is okay. One of the things that we might do is we can either change volume or intensity. Again, we don't necessarily want to do that right out the gate unless like if we're in off season or if, hey, I'm fine to sacrifice a little bit right now until we get things under control. We, like we put out the fire, we start rehabbing, things like that. Sometimes people are okay with that. If people are so scared to lose progress or they have a meet coming up or whatever, then what I like to use is tempos or eccentrics or pauses. These are things that help us keep relative um, relative intensity high. Okay, so relative intensity is something more like the RPE, right? So that allows us to keep that perceived exertion, the amount that you're working, it allows us to keep that high, whereas we're keeping the absolute load low. So the absolute load being like maybe it's a percent, well, but whatever the load on the bar is, we get to keep that down while we're keeping the RPE high. Okay. So for the guy who has pain at 500 pounds, okay, our working weight for the day might be 450, but we're going to do a 2 or 3 second eccentric, meaning slow on the way down. And that is going to be rough. Okay. We could also do like a pause at mid shin, coming up off the floor, depending on how that person tolerates it. Um, we can go slow through the entire motion. So on the way up and on the way down. There are a million different ways that we can do that. That's just the deadlift example, right? We can look at that with squat. We can look at that with bench, shoulder press. It's a little harder with clean and jerk and snatch because you don't really want to go slow. But in the accessory work for those movements, that's where you can really utilize the tempos, eccentrics, pauses, whatever. Obviously, if you're a power lifter and you're competing, this isn't 100% like the exact same lift, right? You might be doing a back squat, but doing like a tempo or a pause or something like that, it's going to be a little different than your comp lift. However, for me, it's close enough that allows us to get out of pain, which in my mind, if you can compete pain free on meet day, it's pretty freaking dope, pretty freaking important. And then, you can really continue to build. You can peak, you can do all the things that you need to. It's just not in that specific comp lift. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Another thing that we can do if you're not going into a meet or anything like that, if you're just someone who's really nervous about losing ground, we can modify your range. So if we know, hey, the bottom part of a squat hurts, but we still want to work on the squatting movement, what we can do is we can still keep the barbell loaded up and we can just modify that range. So we can go just a little higher than normal, just above where it hurts. So you're still getting that loading. And then what I like to do so that we continue to work on that lower part of that range of motion, we can drop the weight and then we can, do some full range of motion squats. Okay. So modifying your range is okay, in my opinion, if you're an average gym goer, if you're an off season, whatever it is. Like I like to use the modifying of your range. We can do rack pulls, we can do floor press, we can do box squats, anything like that. Those are all modifying the range and allows us to stop pissing things off so that we can actually rehab it, but it allows you to get stronger in the process. Okay. And then we also like to look at, again, this kind of goes back to the video, but changing the way you lift. If there's something that you're doing that's technically okay, but there's a more optimized way for you, this is where there's no one perfect form. It is what's perfect for you. That's where that comes in handy and into play. But if we can make a couple tweaks, that might be something that allows you to continue to train 100% and we can rehab in the background. So just something to think about. If all of that fails, if we can't get pain under control, if you're having pain with that movement, no matter what weight's on the bar, then something we might want to do is just change the variation. Okay. So instead of a back squat, maybe we're doing a front squat. Maybe instead of a back squat, we're doing a safety bar squat. Maybe we can't tolerate any of those. So we're doing a goblet squat or rear foot elevated split squat or a lunge or whatever. Same with bench press. Maybe we can't do a full bench, but we can do dumbbell full bench. Or maybe we can't do a full bench on either of those, but we can do a floor press. So there are different ways that we can lift. It doesn't have to be 100%. Hey, like my program says barbell bench press, but it hurts my shoulder. Try a different variation and see if that helps. Again, like these are things that we can do to keep training, to keep getting strong, to prevent losing those gains, to continue to train for your next PR while you have pain. But this does not mean that this is rehab. This does not mean that you're attacking the root cause. And this doesn't mean that if you jump right back into the same variation, it's going to not hurt. So these are just things that I like to use to train with pain while we are also doing the rehab process in the background. It is very important to still find the root cause. For me, if you're just not pissing something off, you're not rehabbing. You're not actually fixing anything. You're just not pissing it off. And that's something that I ask my clients all the time. Okay, are we actually getting better? Or are we just not pissing things off? Where are we at? And that is very important because if we're just not pissing things off, then really we haven't made progress, right? You haven't made progress if you're just avoiding the things that hurt, right? At that point, it's no better than just sitting at home, not doing anything, right? Just taking that 1 month rest that your doctor prescribed because you're not actually fixing the root cause. So again, these are ways that you can train with pain. You should utilize these. However, it is very, very important to still get to the root of your issue. Okay. So those are the steps that I like to use for training with pain. Another thing that we've talked about previously are the additional factors, right? And now don't have a little bit of snooze fest on me just because these don't seem as important because they are. I've had people who we didn't change anything about their training, but we changed the additional factors and their pain went away. So it's amazing what happens. It's amazing what your body can adapt to and recover from if you actually give it the things that it needs. So, proper nutrition, not eating like an asshole, right? Getting good quality protein in, getting your sleep, managing your stress, getting your freaking water. I am not good about water. I will be the first to admit it, but that is going to be one of the first things that I change if I don't feel like my body's at 100%. Okay. Again, I could do better throughout the day, 100%. However, I know, hey, this is probably a water thing. I just need to bump up my water and I'm good. Usually it is. Okay. If I'm not recovering very well, I check my water because everything else is pretty dialed in, right? Like it's like clockwork at this point. So for me, like it is so important to take a look at your additional factors: nutrition, sleep, stress, even alcohol, right? Limiting your alcohol intake. It is amazing what that will do for your inflammation in your body and what it'll do for your pain. So, those are things that I also like to look at. Um, you know, I think it's important to note getting I talk to people who get like 4 hours of sleep. That's not really doing anything for you. Not just from a recovery standpoint, but also a performance standpoint. If you're like pissed off at your results in the gym, try freaking sleeping a little bit more and you'll probably be pretty happy. It's the same thing with recovery from injury, right? How do you expect your body to recover if you're getting no sleep? If you're getting 8 hours of sleep, but you feel like dog shit when you wake up, it's probably something we should look at with your sleep. Okay. Managing stress. If you're just constantly stressed, your body is going to be so focused on escaping this freaking bear that it feels like it's trying to fight than it is like recovering from a workout or an injury. Right. So, those are just some things that I think are very important when it comes to recovery from your workouts in general, but especially recovery from an injury or a rehab. Again, recovering from an injury is not the time to go on a cut. It is not time to try to get that summer body ready. Okay. You really want to give your body everything that it needs. You want to train like freaking Tom Brady, right? That's how you want to try to recover. Not necessarily all the stupid, Normatec boots and all that stuff that he was doing, but that guy was eating well, sleeping, managing stress, not drinking alcohol, and that's what allowed him to play for so long. So you really want to try to act like you're a professional athlete trying to recover for next week's game, next week's lift, or tomorrow's lift, or whatever. And so really, really dial those in. Okay. If you have any questions on this, let me know. Hit me up. But yeah, that is the end of this little mini series.